In the quiet corners of a world obsessed with answers, a single question echoed. How do we find what we're looking for? Before the world was connected, before knowledge was at our fingertips, there was only chaos, an endless sea of information and no map to guide us through it. But in the shadows of uncertainty, a mind was stirring. A mind restless, relentless, and unafraid to dream. A mind that would one day change the way humanity thinks, learns, and searches. This is not just the story of a company. This is the story of a boy who fled oppression, a son who watched his parents sacrifice everything, a student who questioned everything he was told, a rebel who believed in the impossible. This is the story of Sergey Brin, the mind behind Google, a journey from the cold streets of Moscow to the heart of Silicon Valley, a journey through fear, hope, and the unbreakable will to create. Because sometimes the greatest revolutions begin with a single, unanswerable question, and sometimes the answer is a person. Sergey Brin. The world would never be the same, but before the world knew his name, he was just a boy searching for his place in it. And what he found would change everything. Sergey Brin was born in Moscow, in the heart of the Soviet Union, on August 21, 1973. He entered a world defined by boundaries, political, social, and personal. A world where questions were dangerous, and curiosity was a risk. His parents, Michael and Eugenia, were mathematicians, thinkers, dreamers, survivors. They lived in a country that feared the power of the mind, a place where ambition was a threat and knowledge was tightly controlled. Sergey's earliest memories were not of freedom, but of limitation. He watched his father, a brilliant mathematician, denied opportunities because of his Jewish heritage. He saw his mother, a scientist, forced to hide her intellect behind closed doors. In their small apartment, the air was thick with unspoken dreams. Books lined the shelves, forbidden texts hidden among the pages. Sergey learned early that knowledge was precious and dangerous. He learned to ask questions in whispers, to seek answers in silence. But even as a child, he refused to accept the world as it was. He wanted to know why. Why couldn't his father teach at the university he loved? Why did his mother have to hide her research? Why did the world fear the very thing that made it beautiful, curiosity? Sergey's mind was a storm of questions, and his parents, despite their fear, nurtured that storm. They taught him mathematics, logic, and the language of possibility. They showed him that the world was bigger than the walls around them, but the walls were closing in. Anti-Semitism was rising, opportunities were vanishing. The Brin family faced a choice: stay and surrender to fear, or risk everything for a chance at freedom. Sergey was just 6 years old when his parents made the most difficult decision of their lives. They would leave everything behind: family, friends, the only home they had ever known. They would become strangers in a strange land, all for the hope that their son could ask questions without fear. The journey was long, uncertain, and filled with danger. They traveled through Vienna, then Paris, waiting, hoping, praying for a visa to the United States. Sergey watched his parents struggle, watched them trade comfort for uncertainty, all for a dream he was too young to understand. But even then, he felt the weight of their sacrifice. He knew that every step they took was for him. When they finally arrived in America, they had nothing but hope and a few suitcases. They settled in Maryland, in a small apartment filled with second-hand furniture and first-generation dreams. Sergey was a stranger in a new world. He didn't speak the language. He didn't understand the customs. He was different, and he knew it. But in America, difference was not a curse. It was a possibility. Sergey's parents found work, his father as a professor, his mother as a researcher at NASA. They worked long hours, sacrificing comfort for opportunity. Sergey watched them, learned from them, understood that greatness was not given but earned. He devoured books, learned English, and soon, the boy who had once whispered questions began to shout them from the rooftops. He was insatiable, unstoppable, a mind unleashed. At home, his parents filled the air with ideas: mathematics, science, philosophy. They debated, argued, laughed, and dreamed. Sergey learned that the world was not a fixed place but a puzzle waiting to be solved. He excelled in school, but he was never satisfied with easy answers. He wanted to know how things worked, why things were the way they were, and how they could be better. He built computers from spare parts, taught himself programming, and dreamed of a world where information was free. But even as he thrived, he never forgot the price his family had paid. He carried their sacrifice like a badge of honor, a reminder that freedom was not free and that every question was a gift. Sergey Brin was not born a revolutionary. He was made by the world that tried to silence him, and in that silence he found his voice. But as Sergey's mind grew sharper, the world around him grew more complicated, because the path to greatness is never straight, and the first struggles were waiting, just around the corner. Sergey's teenage years were a battleground of identity and ambition. He was an outsider, a Russian immigrant in a world that didn't always understand him. He was brilliant but awkward, a mind that moved faster than his words, a heart that beat to a different rhythm. School was both a sanctuary and a challenge. He excelled in math and science but struggled to fit in. He was bullied for his accent, mocked for his curiosity, isolated by his intelligence. But Sergey refused to be broken. He found solace in numbers, comfort in logic, and escape in the world of computers. He joined math clubs, science fairs, any place where ideas mattered more than appearances. But even there he felt the sting of rejection. He was too intense, too passionate, too unwilling to accept the status quo. Teachers admired his brilliance but struggled to contain his energy. Classmates respected his intellect but kept their distance. Sergey was alone, but he was never lonely. He had his family, a fortress of love and understanding. At home, he was free to be himself, to question, to argue, to dream. His parents encouraged him to challenge authority, to think for himself, to never accept, because I said so, as an answer. But the world outside was less forgiving. Sergey learned to hide his brilliance, to downplay his curiosity, to fit in just enough to survive. But inside, the fire burned brighter. He devoured books on mathematics, taught himself new programming languages, and dreamed of building something that would change the world. But dreams are fragile things, and reality has a way of testing them. Money was always tight. His parents worked long hours, sacrificing their own dreams for his future. Sergey watched them struggle, felt the weight of their expectations, and wondered if he could ever live up to their sacrifice. He wanted to make them proud, but he also wanted to be free, free to explore, to create, to be himself. The pressure was immense. Every test, every grade, every competition felt like a referendum on his worth. He pushed himself harder, refused to settle for anything less than excellence. But excellence came at a cost. He missed out on parties, friendships, the simple joys of childhood. He was always working, always striving, always chasing a future that felt just out of reach. But Sergey was not alone in his struggle. He found mentors, teachers who saw his potential, friends who shared his passion for technology. Together, they built computers, wrote code, and dreamed of a world where information was free. But the world was not ready for their dreams. The internet was still in its infancy, a wild frontier of possibility and danger. Most people saw it as a toy, a passing fad, but Sergey saw something more. He saw a revolution waiting to happen. He knew that the world was changing and he wanted to be at the center of it. But first, he had to survive high school. He had to prove to himself and to the world that he was more than just a brilliant mind. He was a force to be reckoned with. Sergey graduated at the top of his class, earned a scholarship to the University of Maryland, and set out to make his mark on the world. But the struggles were far from over. College was a new battlefield, a place where the stakes were higher, and the competition was fierce. Sergey threw himself into his studies, majoring in mathematics and computer science. He worked harder than ever, driven by a fear of failure and a hunger for greatness. But the pressure was relentless. He struggled to balance his coursework, his research, and his desire to build something new. He faced rejection, disappointment, and the constant fear that he wasn't good enough. But Sergey refused to give up. He pushed through the pain, fought through the doubt, and emerged stronger than ever. He graduated with honors, earned a fellowship to Stanford University, and took his first step into the unknown. But the real struggles were just beginning, because what Sergey would face next would test not just his mind, but his very soul, and the failures waiting for him would nearly break him. Stanford was a world apart from anything Sergey had ever known. It was a place where the best and brightest came to compete, a crucible of ambition, innovation, and relentless pressure. For the first time, Sergey was surrounded by people who were just as smart, or smarter, than he was. He felt the weight of expectation, the fear of being ordinary in a world of extraordinary minds. He threw himself into his research, exploring the frontiers of computer science, but the path was anything but smooth. His first projects failed to impress. His ideas were dismissed as impractical, his methods questioned by professors and peers alike. He struggled to find his place, to prove that he belonged. He worked late into the night, chasing breakthroughs that never seemed to come. He watched as classmates soared ahead, publishing papers, winning awards, while he was left behind, frustrated and alone. Sergey questioned everything: his talent, his purpose, his future. He wondered if he had made a mistake, if he was chasing a dream that would never come true. But failure was a teacher, and Sergey was a relentless student. He learned from every setback, refused to let disappointment define him. He sought out new mentors, collaborated with other students, and slowly, painfully began to find his voice. But the failures kept coming. He applied for grants and was rejected. He pitched ideas that were laughed out of the room. He built prototypes that crashed and burned. Each failure was a blow, a reminder that greatness was never guaranteed. But Sergey refused to quit. He doubled down, pushed himself harder, and began to see the glimmers of possibility. It was at Stanford that he met Larry Page, a fellow dreamer with a mind as restless as his own. Together, they began to explore the wild frontier of the internet, searching for a way to make sense of the chaos. Their first attempts were clumsy, their algorithms crude. They faced skepticism from professors, dismissal from their peers. But they kept going, driven by a shared belief that the world needed a better way to find information. They worked out of their dorm rooms, living on ramen and caffeine, sacrificing sleep, comfort, and any semblance of a normal life. But the failures kept piling up. Their servers crashed, their code broke, their ideas were dismissed as impossible. Investors laughed them out of the room, telling them that search was a dead end, that no one would ever need what they were building. But Sergey and Larry refused to listen. They believed in their vision, even when no one else did. They poured everything they had into their project, risking their futures on a dream that seemed destined to fail. But the world was changing, and so were they. Every failure was a lesson, every setback a stepping stone. They learned to embrace rejection, to see criticism as fuel for their fire. They built, broke, and rebuilt, refusing to give up. But the pressure was immense. They were running out of money, running out of time, and running out of hope. The world was closing in, and Sergey was forced to confront the possibility that his dream might die before it ever truly lived. But just when it seemed like all was lost, when the darkness threatened to swallow him whole, Sergey Brin faced his darkest moment. And what happened next would change everything. The nights grew longer, the days more uncertain. Sergey found himself staring at the ceiling, haunted by the fear of failure. He had risked everything: his future, his reputation, his family's sacrifice, on a dream that seemed to be slipping through his fingers. The servers crashed again, wiping out months of work. Investors stopped returning calls. Friends and mentors urged him to give up, to take the safe path, to settle for something less. But Sergey couldn't let go. He felt the weight of his parents' journey, the sacrifices they had made, the hope they had placed in him. He couldn't bear the thought of letting them down, but the pressure was crushing. He stopped sleeping, stopped eating, lost himself in the endless cycle of work and worry. He watched as classmates landed jobs at prestigious companies, secured their futures, while he was left with nothing but a broken dream. He questioned everything: his talent, his purpose, his worth. He wondered if he was chasing a fantasy, if he was destined to fail. The darkness closed in, and Sergey felt himself slipping. He withdrew from friends, pushed away those who cared about him. He became a ghost, haunted by the fear that he would never be enough. But even in the darkness, a spark remained. He remembered his father's words: "Never let anyone tell you what you can't do." He remembered his mother's sacrifice, her belief in the power of knowledge. He remembered the boy who had fled oppression, who had dared to dream of something more. And slowly, painfully, he began to fight his way back. He reached out to Larry, shared his fears, and found strength in their partnership. Together, they recommitted to their vision, refused to let failure define them. They worked through the night, rebuilding what had been lost, refusing to give up. But the darkness was not easily banished. There were more setbacks, more disappointments, more moments when it seemed like all was lost. But Sergey refused to surrender. He drew strength from his past, from the sacrifices of his family, from the belief that the world could be better. He learned to embrace the darkness, to see it not as an enemy, but as a teacher. He learned that greatness is not the absence of struggle, but the refusal to be broken by it. And in that darkness, he found his true strength. But in the depths of despair, a single decision would change everything. A turning point that would set Sergey Brin on the path to greatness. It was a moment of clarity, a flash of insight in the darkness. Sergey realized that the world didn't need another search engine. It needed a new way of thinking, a new way of organizing the world's information. He and Larry reimagined their project, not as a product, but as a mission to make information accessible to everyone, everywhere. They called it Google. It was a simple idea, but it would change everything. They focused on building the best search engine in the world, one that was fast, accurate, and unbiased. They poured their hearts and souls into the project, refusing to settle for anything less than excellence. They reached out to investors, refined their pitch, and finally, after months of rejection, they found someone who believed in their vision. Andy Bechtolsheim, a legendary investor, wrote them a check for $100,000 on the spot. It was the lifeline they needed, the validation they had been searching for. With that check, Google was born. Sergey and Larry moved into a friend's garage, hired a small team, and began the relentless pursuit of their dream. They worked around the clock, driven by a sense of purpose and possibility. They faced new challenges, new setbacks, but they refused to give up. They believed in their mission, and slowly the world began to believe in them. Google grew, attracting users, investors, and talent. Sergey found his voice, his confidence, his place in the world. He was no longer the outsider, no longer the boy who had to hide his brilliance. He was a leader, a visionary, a force to be reckoned with. And the world was about to take notice. But the rise of Google was not a straight line. It was a battle, against doubt, against competition, against the very forces that had tried to silence Sergey his entire life. And the fight was just beginning. Google was more than a company, it was a revolution. Sergey and Larry built a culture of innovation, a place where ideas mattered more than titles, where failure was not a curse, but a stepping stone. They hired the best and brightest, people who shared their passion for making the world's information accessible. They worked tirelessly, pushing the limits of what was possible. Every day brought new challenges, technical hurdles, business obstacles, skepticism from the outside world. But Sergey thrived in the chaos. He was relentless, uncompromising, driven by a vision that was bigger than himself. He challenged his team to think differently, to question everything, to never settle for good enough. He led by example, working late into the night, solving problems that others thought were impossible. He was not afraid to take risks, to fail, to start over. He believed that the only way to change the world was to never stop trying. Google's search engine grew, attracting millions of users, transforming the way people found information. But Sergey was not satisfied. He wanted more. He wanted to build a company that would last, a company that would change the world. He pushed his team to innovate, to build new products, to take on new challenges. They launched Gmail, revolutionized email. They built Google Maps, changed the way people navigated the world. They created Android, brought the internet to billions of people. Every success was hard-won, every victory the result of relentless effort and sacrifice. Sergey faced new challenges, competition from tech giants, legal battles, the pressure of leading a company that was changing the world. But he never lost sight of his mission. He never forgot the boy who had fled oppression, the family that had sacrificed everything for his future. He led with humility, with empathy, with a belief that technology could make the world a better place. He built a culture of openness, of transparency, of relentless curiosity. He encouraged his team to ask questions, to challenge authority, to never accept the world as it was. Google grew into a global powerhouse, a company that touched every corner of the world. But Sergey remained grounded, rooted in the values that had shaped him. He gave back, invested in education, supported causes that mattered to him. He never forgot where he came from, or the people who had helped him along the way. He became a mentor, a leader, a symbol of what was possible when you refused to give up. But the rise was not without its costs. Sergey sacrificed time, relationships, the simple joys of life. He faced criticism, scrutiny, the pressure of living up to impossible expectations. But he never wavered. He never lost sight of his mission. He never stopped believing in the power of curiosity, the importance of asking questions, the possibility of changing the world. Google became more than a company. It became a movement, a force for good, a testament to the power of a single mind to change the course of history. But as Google grew, so did the challenges. Success brought new enemies, new obstacles, and new questions. And Sergey Brin would have to face them all. The world watched as Google became a titan, a company that shaped the very fabric of the internet. Sergey Brin stood at the center of it all, a visionary who had turned a dream into reality. But success was a double-edged sword. With power came responsibility, with influence came scrutiny. Sergey faced new challenges, regulatory battles, privacy concerns, the pressure to innovate in a world that was always changing. He navigated these challenges with the same relentless curiosity that had defined his journey from the beginning. He built teams, launched new products, expanded Google's reach into every corner of the globe. He invested in moonshot projects, self-driving cars, artificial intelligence, the future of technology. He believed that the only way to stay ahead was to never stop dreaming. He encouraged his team to take risks, to fail fast, to learn from every mistake. He built a culture of innovation, a place where the impossible became possible. Google became a household name, a company that touched billions of lives. Sergey became one of the most influential people in the world, a symbol of what was possible when you refused to give up. But he never lost sight of his roots. He gave back, invested in education, supported causes that mattered to him. He remained humble, grounded in the values that had shaped him. He never forgot the boy who had fled oppression, the family that had sacrificed everything for his future. He became a mentor, a leader, a symbol of hope for a new generation of dreamers. But the challenges never stopped. The world was changing faster than ever, and Sergey knew that the only way to stay ahead was to keep asking questions, to keep pushing the boundaries of what was possible. He led Google through periods of immense growth, navigated crises, and emerged stronger every time. He built an empire, but he never lost sight of his mission. He believed that technology could make the world a better place, and he dedicated his life to making that vision a reality. Google became more than a company. It became a force for good, a testament to the power of curiosity, the importance of asking questions, and the possibility of changing the world. Sergey Brin's journey was far from over, but his legacy was already secure. But what does it take to build a legacy? What does it mean to change the world? And what can we learn from the mind behind Google? Sergey Brin's story is not just about technology. It's about the power of curiosity, the importance of asking questions, and the courage to dream. He taught us that greatness is not the absence of struggle, but the refusal to be broken by it. He showed us that the world is not a fixed place, but a puzzle waiting to be solved. He believed that knowledge is power, and that the only way to change the world is to never stop learning. He built a company that changed the way we live, but he never lost sight of the values that had shaped him. He remained humble, grounded, committed to making the world a better place. He gave back, invested in education, supported causes that mattered to him. He became a mentor, a leader, a symbol of hope for a new generation of dreamers. His legacy is not just Google, but the millions of lives he has touched, the countless minds he has inspired. He taught us that the only limits are the ones we place on ourselves, and that the greatest revolutions begin with a single, unanswerable question. Sergey Brin's story is a testament to the power of the human spirit, the importance of never giving up, and the possibility of changing the world. He showed us that greatness is not given, but earned through sacrifice, through struggle, through the relentless pursuit of a dream. And he reminded us that the world is full of possibility, if we are brave enough to ask the right questions. Sergey Brin's journey began with a question that changed the world. He showed us that the power to change the world lies within each of us. That greatness is not the absence of struggle, but the refusal to be broken by it. He taught us to never stop asking questions, to never stop dreaming, to never accept the world as it is. He built an empire, but he never lost sight of his mission. He changed the way we live, the way we think, the way we search for answers. He showed us that the only limits are the ones we place on ourselves, that the greatest revolutions begin with a single, unanswerable question. Sergey Brin's story is not just about technology. It's about the power of curiosity, the importance of asking questions, and the courage to dream. He reminded us that the world is full of possibility if we are brave enough to ask the right questions. So ask, dream, never give up, because the world is waiting for your question, and the answer might just change everything. Sergey Brin, the mind behind Google, a testament to the power of a single mind to change the course of history, and a reminder that the greatest revolutions begin with a single, unanswerable question. What will yours be?